the NFL biggest draft busts at certain positions. So this could be all time. I mean, obviously you watched more football before that. So we'll just alternate positions. What do you think are some of the biggest NFL draft busts at each position, and maybe some that are forgotten about?
Well, I don't know if you're a Jet fan, and if you are a Jet fan out there, I don't think you're going to forget about Vernon Gholston, who was a complete bust as a defensive lineman, did nothing for the New York Jets. I think he had 1 sack and at about 3 or 4 tackles in his career. This guy was a top draft pick. He was a top 10 draft pick. I think the Jets drafted him at the 4th pick from Ohio State. He was a complete bust. Absolutely horrendous. Also, Ryan Leaf. Ryan Leaf was a complete bust as a quarterback. He was drafted after Peyton Manning, if you guys remember, and he had drug problems off the field, and this guy is in and out of jail. I think he just got out of jail. I mean, he was a complete bust as a quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, two that come to mind for me. I'll do one offense, one defense. Defensively, Aaron Curry was definitely one of them. A big name linebacker out of Wake Forest. I believe it was the 2009 draft for the Seahawks, who normally draft defensive players as well, but they definitely did not in that draft. Aaron Curry, I really liked a lot. He really did not do anything, especially on a good linebacking core like they had. So that's one definitely for defense. And then offensively, receiver, 2013 draft, Tavon Austin was definitely a huge bust. Everyone thought his speed was going to make a difference at the next level in a faster game, and obviously that didn't happen because all he had were drop problems. He was basically Robbie Anderson that could line up as a running back.
Well, as a Jet fan, I've looked at some of these teams and some of these rosters that the Jets have had over the years. Here's another bust. Milliner, who was drafted from Alabama.
I was wrong on him. Yeah.
He was an absolute complete bust. He couldn't do anything on the field. After the Jets, I don't even think anybody signed him. How about the Louisville Slugger, Calvin Pryor?
Yeah.
Another guy that was a top draft pick who came to the Jets. Everybody was talking about how great of a tackler he is and how he knocked people out on the field when he played for Louisville. And then all of a sudden he came to the New York Jets, and he was in and out of the New York Jets organization within 3 years. So those are another 2 players that were complete busts. Right. And of course, New York Jets.
A lot of the 2013 first round, if you look back at it, it was really bad. So the Jets weren't the only one, but again, that was a bad one. Another corner that drafted the year after that was highly touted and became a bust. Naturally drafted by the Browns. Justin Gilbert was another one. I think he most recently played at the Steelers. He played okay there, but again, not great. He was a high-profile corner out of Oklahoma State, but he never got it done. And he's just one of the many laundry list of Browns that didn't get it to work. And in a 2014 draft that was loaded, that's surprising. And then the second pick of the 2014 draft, an offensive lineman, probably the biggest O-line bust, was Greg Robinson.
Who's the guy that Jacksonville drafted, the quarterback that they drafted a couple of years ago?
Bortles or Gabbert?
Gabbert. I mean, Blaine Gabbert, who's still in the league, and Bortles, who's going to be a backup and probably won't be in the league this year. 2 quarterbacks that were completely busts. And you're talking about Jacksonville. These guys, Gabbert was the number 1 draft pick, right?
I loved him out of the draft. I was very wrong on him.
I mean, he was the number 1 draft pick, and he was a complete bust. And even though he's had better opportunities as a backup quarterback as he's moved forward in his career, this guy, complete bust. This was the number 1 pick in the draft, and he was complete bust. And Blake Bortles, forget about it. I mean, I don't know what the heck. And by the way, Matty Caps, who absolutely loved Blake Bortles. He hated Andy Dalton, who's still in the league, who could be starting for the Cowboys this year and has had success in the NFL. You're talking about Blake Bortles. What success has he had in the NFL? And don't tell me about that playoff run, because it had nothing to do with Blake Bortles. Yeah, nothing.
You know what's interesting is with Jacksonville, they've been one of the worst drafting teams, too. They tend to reach on a lot of players just from the fact that they're being from Florida.
Not defensive players.
Derek Harvey was one. Yes. 2008, he was a bad draft pick for them. Dante Fowler.
He's a good player.
He was all right.
Injury, remember, he tore his ACL.
Yes, he never played in his rookie year, but again, he was really just a speed rusher. I thought they reached on him a little bit in that draft.
Still a good player in the NFL.
But it seems like they'd like to reach on a lot of Florida players, and again, Bortles being the worst of them, obviously, in that draft. Because Bortles, I don't think was ever thought of to go that high. Everyone was hyping up Manziel. Everyone was hyping up Bridgewater in that draft. Bortles was supposed to be more of that late first-round pick type, so that was definitely very interesting. Definitely another receiver to look at, oddly enough, the Jaguars, is Justin Blackmon. Now, Justin Blackmon off-field issues obviously cost him more than actual playing, because we don't know what he would have been playing-wise. But again, it's the Jaguars. They love to gamble on stuff like that when it comes to the off-field issues, and hence they don't draft well as a result. So that's another one for me in that draft. And then in that same 2011 draft, right, The other quarterback that was taken was Jake Locker. Now, Jake Locker is somebody I thought that got a little bit of a raw deal, but again, he didn't produce like he was supposed to either. The Titans front office was bad to an extent, but again, they could have taken Cam Newton was in that draft, and then like you were saying, Dalton was in that draft, who was again decent starting quarterback, not great. So the Titans definitely gambled and lost on that.
Bust in 1995, Kijana Carter, the running back who was a top running back in college football. He was a top draft pick, a first overall pick in 1995. You're talking about a running back that was the number one pick, and he was a complete bust by the Bengals. He was absolutely, and when you look at him, he tore his ACL, and really how his career just progressed, even not with the Bengals, with other teams and other organizations. He just couldn't find his way, and that's the problem when you look at Kijana Carter. Also, we mentioned Ryan Leaf, so I'm looking at some of the players. I'm skimming through some of the busts, and Tim Couch was a bust, first overall pick in 1999, who was a fairly good quarterback with the Browns, but he also played for one of the worst organizations.
Right.
And if he played, maybe if he was drafted by another team, another organization, maybe we wouldn't be talking about Tim Couch as being a bust. But
right.
Tim Couch Jake Locker, by the way, you're absolutely right, Carl. He was absolute garbage. Jake Locker, who wasn't even I think he was a second or third round draft pick.
He was the first round pick.
Was
I think
he?
he was 8th overall. Yeah, I think he was picked.
Jake Locker?
Yeah, he was.
I didn't
but
know
again,
that.
his injuries he was always thought of as more the raw but could be talented type of quarterback. But again, his injuries and the Titans' bad front office decisions cost him big time. You mentioned the Kijana Carter. Another one for the Bengals is Achilles Smith, the running quarterback. I forget which draft it was exactly, but he was highly touted as a running quarterback, flashy running quarterback, and he definitely never got it going in the NFL.
How about Vince Young? I mean, Vince Young, who was the third overall pick. You remember what he did, with Texas, with Texas, and what he did against the USC team, Matt Leinart, his last season.
Talk about another one.
We'll get into that too, because I liked Matt Leinart when he was coming out of USC. I thought he was going to be successful, just like when we saw Palmer, when Carson Palmer got drafted. We thought, hey, now maybe they'll have a spurt of good young quarterbacks that come out of USA. But ever since then, you look at it, it's been completely terrible when it comes to it. But Vince Young, who really did not develop as a quarterback in the NFL, he was the prototypical running quarterback that can make throws on the run. Everybody thought he was going to be a great player coming out of Texas, winning the national title. He was a complete bust.
Sport possibly positionless. So what are your thoughts to that? With players now that can play 3 positions in baseball all the time, especially with basketball now, you're seeing LeBron line up at point guard. What are your thoughts to that?
Well, it's an interesting conversation because when you look at professional sports and the way it's transitioned in the 90s in basketball, it was a big man's league, and it's slowly but surely changed to a point guard position league because of the 3-point shot. You're looking at Steph Curry, Kyrie Irving, Chris Paul, all these point guards that can shoot the 3, are very good around the perimeter. The game has transitioned into that style of game. Now, when you look at the sport of the NBA, now it's become a small man's game. You're talking about where you don't need a big man anymore. And if the big man is a big man, you see some of the big men playing the power forward position or the small forward position because they're so athletic. So the game has changed because of the way these athletes have developed in the game of basketball. In football, you're looking at the game. You see linebackers playing defensive end. We've seen defensive end playing the nose tackle position. Yep. We've seen safeties play the corner position. Corners play the safety position. Also, safeties play the linebacker position depending on their size and their speed. The quarterback. We've seen quarterbacks transition into the wide receiving position or really change to the cornerback position. We've seen, and why, it's just the game has changed and the sports have changed. And in the NHL, we've seen offensive players become defensive players, and we have not seen a goaltender turn into an offensive player. We have never seen that before. But we've also seen goaltenders score goals. Martin Brodeur, over the years, he scored, I think, 2 or 3 goals.
I think he scored 3 goals, yeah.
So the game has changed. It absolutely has changed in all professional sports. So do I look at the sports and the way it's developed and the development of the game and the speed of the game? Are we going to see transitions as we move forward in the sports? Absolutely. The game has absolutely changed. So yes, it has become a positionless game in multiple sports, even in baseball.
Yeah, and I think the other thing you got to look at too is basketball. We'll see if the phase lasts because again, this is a 3-point shooting league now, where now you're having big men that could pass so they could facilitate the guards to shoot threes, and even you got big men shooting threes. We'll see if that phase lasts. But definitely with football, I could definitely see that trend continuing. The other thing you're seeing a lot is different positions lining up in the backfield, whether it's receivers, tight ends. You were talking about quarterbacks playing receiver a lot of the time. You're going to see
Julian
that.
Edelman.
You're going to see that a lot as offenses get more creative. You see now these RPO offenses, these motion offenses. That's the sport I could definitely see the trend continuing in. And for baseball, now you're seeing a lot of guys that could play multiple positions. Now, do they play them all well is another question. You don't see a guy that's great defensively at maybe 4 different positions, but he'll be great at one and maybe good at some others. And that you're definitely seeing that. And again, as rosters become deeper, that's what we're seeing now. GMs like to stash their players away and try to find spots for them if they have the talent. They'll adjust and have those guys play the position. You were talking about with Jay. Could Gary Sanchez move to first base, something like that? That's a more conventional one, but we've seen definitely some other cases where you have shortstops moving to center field.
We've seen pitchers move to the outfield.
Yeah, Joe Madden invented that with the Cubs when he went there. He double switched two different pitchers in one game into the outfield.
The transition of all these professional sports games are going to be unique moving forward. We're talking about electronic umpires coming into the game, and really the transition of the game, the athletic part of the game, when these athletes are much more athletic than they were in the 90s. And they can do more things. They can jump higher. They move faster. You got guys like LeBron James, who's 260 pounds of brute muscle that can jump like a deer and can do things that we've never seen an athlete do, but has done before in the game of basketball. And then you look at professional football and some of these corners and what they can do, how they're 5'10" and have a vertical leap of 40. I mean, it's incredible what these athletes can do now in the game. So you can transition these guys into different positions. And you've seen defensive coordinators do it. We've seen offensive coordinators do it. How about offensive linemen we've seen become tight ends? Right. I mean, we've seen this.
And we've seen smaller offensive linemen succeed more, too. Usually it was in the late 80s, early 90s, it was all about the big, bulky guys, the big mauling, blocking types. But now it's more about technique guys. You're seeing guys under 300 pounds be good offensive linemen in certain systems. So it's definitely changing. And the other thing with smaller athletes you're seeing, too, and I think it's more like the Darren Sproles effect. You're seeing a lot of quicker, smaller receivers and running backs too, which is, again, not only Darren Sproles, but I think a lot of his influence, being how versatile he was in his career, is making a difference on the way the game is too. And it's getting smaller to an extent because they prioritize speed.
And also, when we talk about position and position of play, you're looking at the game and the transition of some of these positions, the middle linebacker to the outside linebacker. What does that entail? The safety position. What does that entail now in a defensive style of game, in a 4-3 or 3-4 defense? I mean, the game is completely transitioned. It's not like it was when Buddy was running the defensive style of game with the Bears. I mean, and we're talking about Buddy Ryan. And you look at Rex Ryan's, his style of defense was completely, even though it was a blitz package, he used different blitz packages that his father didn't use. Bringing up safeties, bringing up corners, using 2 corners to maneuver into the safety positions while you bring up the safeties. I mean, the game has transitioned. We've seen Bill Belichick transition position to, these players at a different position. You have to have multiple positions if he's going to draft you.
Right. He'll draft him at a tight end, and then he'll play him at offensive line or something like that.
It's incredible what some of these coaches design, and the game has transitioned completely differently. And that's why when you watch football, you watch basketball, you watch hockey, you watch baseball, and you see the growth of some of these managers, these coaches, and the way they develop some of the styles of the games and how they call their plays at the line of scrimmage for the quarterback to see the defensive style of game on where they're going to bring in the blitz and how they're going to bring in the blitz, or the audible plays from the quarterbacks at the position on what the coaches are calling at the line of scrimmage. So it's completely different than it was when we were kids, when I was a kid, when I watched the game when I was a child. So yes, I think it's positionless. And I think when you look at the transition of the game, it's going to grow astronomically because of the way the game has transitioned for these coaches, for these players.
Carl, you commented on Facebook, Devin Bush is a middle linebacker and he's small. You're right. That never would have happened in probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And definitely when Errol was mentioning before that, because they prioritized bulky guys, zone coverage. Everyone had to be Ray Lewis. Everyone had to be Brian Urlacher. Now you're not seeing that as much anymore. Now you're seeing more speed types. And even a lot of the top ones, guys like Deion Jones, Jalen Smith, they're all speed types now. Bobby Wagner, speed type. I mean, he's a good physical guy too, but you're seeing a lot of that. And you would never see that 5-6 years ago. You would have thought of Devin Bush as maybe that hybrid type of player that was only used in certain sets.